Hi, I'm Heidi Herriott, the host of the Animal Tales podcast, and I'd like to welcome you to my new series, Doggone Good Information. And please welcome my co-host, Tommy Fahey. Hi, Tommy.
Good morning, Heidi. How are you?
I'm great. Good to see you. And
you too.
Always enjoy these opportunities to chat with you and present some hopefully doggone good information to the folks.
Yeah.
So how was your week? Anything interesting happened to you this week? Or Jimmy Dean, maybe?
We had a doozy of a week with Jimmy Dean. Jimmy Dean met a skunk.
Jimmy Dean is the Jack Russell Terrier, if you haven't tuned in prior.
He's my 5-year-old Jack Russell Terrier, and he met Pepe Le Pew the skunk in the backyard this weekend.
In your backyard?
Yep.
Oh, my.
So I should have known better. About 6 o'clock Saturday morning, he was up and at the back door trying to go outside. And I thought, he's just got to go out. No, there was a skunk in the backyard that he heard. So immediately, as soon as he ran out the back door, I hear him yelp and scream. And I thought, oh, great, here we go. So I look out the back door and here's the little skunk right at my back door, sitting on my back porch.
Oh, no.
And so I can't go outside because the skunk's in the way and I'm going to get sprayed then. Jimmy Dean's run off into the yard, rolling and screaming and yelping and trying to get the scent off of him. So I just had to wait for the skunk to clear out and get out of the way. But this has happened one time before, and I did some research on how to get rid of the skunk smell. So I was prepared. I had the ingredients. So you take baking soda, hydrogen peroxide, and Dawn dish soap.
Oh.
And you put it in a bowl and you make like a paste. So it's like 1-to-1 ratio on the baking soda and hydrogen peroxide, and then just a couple of drops of the Dawn dish soap. And you make a paste out of that. And before you get the dog wet, don't take the dog and rinse it off, because that actually is going to make the oil of the skunk scent. It's going to actually set it into their fur. So you leave them dry, you take this paste and you rub it all over the dog, anywhere where they got sprayed, and you let it dry.
Oh.
So, yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, but the baking soda pulls the oil out of the fur, and then the hydrogen peroxide neutralizes the odor, and then the Dawn dish soap kind of breaks up the oil, but also makes the paste a little bit more of like a glue consistency.
Okay.
So it sticks to the hair a little bit better.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you do all of that. So I mixed up my little bowl of ingredients and walked out into the backyard after the skunk had made his exit, and got Jimmy Dean to come up to me and, again, prepare. He knows how to get on a mark. And so I have a mark on the back porch that he had to go and sit on. And I made him wait right there.
Oh, boy. Don't come in the house.
Yeah. That's a big... I made that mistake last year when this happened. I
Oh,
let him in
boy.
the house before I realized it happened. And so then it was all in my house, and I couldn't get it out. So this time, before he went inside, I had him in the backyard, and I rubbed him all over with this paste, and let it just sit. And he ran around the backyard and rolled in the grass. And so now my grass has all the baking soda in it. It was really funny.
Oh, my gosh.
But yeah, and then I brought him inside and took him to the kitchen sink and rinsed him out. He's only about 15 to 18 pounds. So he fits right in the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
And rinsed all that out, and then used a shampoo to actually kind of cover up whatever leftover scent there was. But
fun.
It took out most of the smell. There's a little bit there, but not nearly as offensive as it could be. So yeah, and then that was Saturday, and I just bathed him again last night to get rid of the rest of it.
Wow.
So yeah, so there's your tip on care for dogs: is baking soda, hydrogen peroxide, and dish soap.
Okay. Well, why do I think tomato juice was involved in the past?
Yeah, that was a thing.
Okay.
And I think really what it was is there's a vinegar component in tomato juice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
An acidic, so that would break down the oil as well. But when I researched it, there's actually a chemist looked at how does what is in a skunk's scent, what makes the scent actually so
Oh,
offensive.
interesting.
And it's a compound. I'll use my degree here from organic chemistry. It's a thiol compound. And so he figured out that hydrogen peroxide and baking soda would neutralize it. So you use chemistry to your advantage.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. So did Jimmy Dean seem to enjoy the interaction with the skunk, or was it just...
No?
Okay.
he was quite offended.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh my.
He screamed and yelped and then was running away trying to get the scent off of him. And then the skunk's just bebopping around trying to make his way out of my backyard.
Oh my gosh.
So,
I hope that doesn't happen to me. Gosh, we're in a fairly, not that it couldn't, but fairly tight neighborhood I live in Pinellas County, Florida, when I'm home in the winters anyhow. I like to travel. But we have a nice fenced-in backyard, which makes it great for dog training. Big enough, but not too big they can really get away and hide. But I think it would be hard for something to make its way in. We have a big coyote problem.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and again, Pinellas County, Florida is, I want to say, like 36 square miles and about 1 million people. We're very dense.
Yeah.
So, there's some beautiful parks, but other than that, there's not open space. Actually, with the horse world, it's pretty unsatisfying because you get postage stamp spaces. I like a horse to run and fart and buck and, kick up their heels. And you don't get that. But we have a big coyote problem. It's really interesting. I don't know if you have that. You're in Missouri, but the Ring doorbells on Nextdoor is very popular. I find, because I travel, Nextdoor isn't popular throughout the country because I do my dog training advertisements primarily on there because you're reaching your neighborhood. Yeah. But when you get in more rural areas, Nextdoor is not that popular. It's kind of interesting. Right. But these Ring doorbells, they'll see 2 and 3 together, which it's quite scary. And apparently they will go after cats. I don't know that there's
for sure.
as much evidence with like little dogs and cats get left out more often or that. But it's really kind of problematic. It scares me a bit. So
I wouldn't think in such a developed area that would be so dense.
Yeah, and of course you get the live and let live. They were here first, and then you get the other people like, let's take them out or trap them, and the divisiveness of social media on that,
Oh yes.
I tend to think we should be trapping a little bit because they're really fairly pronounced in our area.
Population control. That's a big topic with animals, and feral cats even can be a problem.
Well, I think I've mentioned on this podcast, I got salmonella from feral cats. A woman trying to take care of a bunch of cats. She was a very bleeding heart, and I don't dismiss taking care of animals, don't get me wrong, but I was renting her barn, and they get all over the top, they climb on everything, so all the top of the feed cans and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a giant litter box nearby, and 30 feral cats, and just from picking up the feed can tops and touching my stuff, I got salmonella. I'm not a fastidious hand washer, I have to admit. And growing up with animals, a lot of us aren't. It's kind of an interesting equation there, but so I'm always thinking about that. And that goes to the whole premise of my podcast, and the way I think is it's very emotional, happy, or it's bad, but there's a middle. And so, yes, we want to take care of animals, but you're talking about feral cats or coyotes. They're not vaccinated. They're not getting wormed, so they're crapping somewhere. And, what kind of parasites or such are they bringing to the table? Years ago, I was up at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a very pretty area, at a miniature horse park called the Land of Little Horses, still in existence. And I lived on the property in a over 100-year-old farmhouse, quite charming. But my horses were out in the pasture, and the farm had 100 acres, so it was lovely, rolling hills. I'd look out and see a dozen deer in the pasture, and you can cue the violins and the rainbows and unicorns. Isn't that lovely? I was panicked because the deer had, there was a deer tick that was huge.
Uh-huh.
In Pennsylvania, in those areas where you get a lot of woods, those are problematic. So I didn't see this utopian, look at the beautiful deer. They were just one fence away from my horses. I was like, no, because in my mind was going to, what are they bringing to the table? I wasn't planning to take them out or anything. I just wasn't thrilled that they could get that close. We had a bunch of different animals there. Petting zoo, we had some sheep and goats and a camel and different animals. Yeah. And it just, again, got back to best practices, which we talk about a lot on this podcast, of, trying to figure out how to best manage your animals with disease and parasites and such. So that always comes to mind.
Anytime, and with any species, when you have a population density,
right,
that gets really excessive, that's when you're going to start to have disease problems. You're going to start to have parasite problems, things that you wouldn't normally maybe see in the environment, because in its most natural form, our environment is sort of designed to take care of these problems. But when we get off of that more natural idea, which doesn't hardly exist anywhere anymore, then we start to see these little problems kind of crop out. Yeah. So, if you only had 1 or 2 barn cats, you maybe wouldn't have gotten the salmonella. But when you have 30 all in the same place, you're going to have that issue.
Yeah, it was scary. And it's like the Mustang. I'm going to do an episode on Mustangs in my Animal Tales podcast, probably within the next month or two. The dilemma, again, that the middle, because there's so many of them that they're, again, disease and the opportunity to find food and such out west. Yeah. And, don't kill the Mustangs. They were here first. They're in the other side. So, life is pretty much just one big dilemma. Let's face it, everything now, right?
Well, and how do you decide if they were Mustangs or if they were just horses that were turned loose, 50, 60 years ago?
Right. And
or hundreds of years ago.
That's coming up as well. And even now with the problem with, people are loading horses in other people's trailers because they can't afford to keep them. They don't want to deal with a horse they don't use anymore. So there's, again, part of the podcast, back to the emojis, but just realistic information. It's not good. It's not necessarily bad. It's not necessarily good. It's just, it is what it is. And there are decisions to be made. And we're just trying to arrive at the best, or the government or whomever. And we tend to vilify all sides of this,
Yes.
And I'm just trying to provide some better information, which kind of leads us into where we are, what our topic is going to be today. We're going to talk about emergency preparedness with our animals. And I thought this was a great topic, Tommy, because I know you're over in Missouri, but Arkansas, this is early April, had some terrible tornadoes. I've heard like upwards of 30 people dead, that perished in these storms.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Yeah, and even though they had warning that they were so bad, and the magnitude of the storms. I was in the tail end. I was over in Tallahassee. We got some bad storms last week, but just the very tail. So I'm Heidi Herriott, and Tommy Fahey, my co-host, and we're on Doggone Good Information and getting ready to move into our main topic, which is emergency preparedness. So Tommy, I'm going to let you start with this. I have some good information I want to impart as well, but let you jump into this for us.
Yeah, so when we decided to approach this topic, I just did a quick Google search because that's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
And several websites pop up. Several of them were government websites. So from ready.gov, which is the U.S. government that puts together emergency preparedness ideas, plans. They have a really easy to follow website and a great brochure that's out there that gives you all the information. And it's really just simple, logical things that you need to be prepared and plan for the worst. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. And I think that's something you and I are probably quite good at because of our history of being in entertainment. You have to have plan A, B, C, all the way through Z, because things don't always go according to plan.
And we've been mobile. We've had mobile facilities. So some ways that helps us, and some ways that makes you kind of vulnerable, right?
Yeah, exactly. So no matter where you are in the country, you're going to have some kind of disaster that's going to be more prominent. So for you down in Florida, you're going to have hurricane season. Where I'm at in the Midwest, we have tornado season. Just last night, we had some pretty severe thunderstorms come through, and there were some tornado watches and tornado warnings around. And then, of course, there's going to be wildfires out west, and there's going to be mudslides and monsoons. And no matter where you are, something is going to happen.
Freezing blizzards up in the north in the winter,
So you just have to be prepared for, any worst case scenario. So on the ready.gov website, they have a brochure available, and their sort of 3-step plan is our 3-step advice is make a plan, build an emergency kit, and stay informed. And that's kind of the general, what they say to everybody. But specifically for the pets, what they recommend is know how and where to evacuate to. So before something bad happens,
that's the key.
Get an idea of where you're going to go. Because in the moment, you may not be able to think, where you're going to go. And then explore around that area, wherever you're going to go, whether it's to a different city, to a different county, whatever. And then you need to know what's available there. Don't assume that a hotel is going to let you come in with your pet.
Yeah.
Not all hotels will allow you to come in with a pet.
Yeah.
So be ready that may not be an option.
Shelters as well. I know in Florida, because of the hurricane, we get like evacuations a few days ahead, right? Mm-hmm. Which not all disasters allow for. So they not all the shelters are pet friendly, and the ones that are have very specific criteria. This is not loosey-goosey at all. That's very and really not what most pet owners would be comfortable with, or the way people operate. You and I would be fine with it, but the kennels and that kind of stuff we'll talk about in a minute. But so you gotta know ahead.
Yeah. So the other one, they say develop a buddy system. So make sure that some other friend or neighbor or somebody can help you with your pets. So if you're not available or you're incapacitated, that somebody else knows how to take care of the animal, knows what their needs are. I talked to a lot of clients about this with their horses, especially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People who care for their own animals, and you do things a certain way, and what supplements or medications, or this horse likes the feed put there, and this dog only eats out of this bowl or whatever. Write everything down.
Yeah.
Have a list that you update on a regular basis, so that I call it the least common denominator. That the least educated person, the least experienced person could come in and follow your step-by-step directions and know exactly what to do. And that will help keep it consistent for the animal, who's now going to be stressed because either you're not there or the environment has changed or whatever. But if you write everything down, that will really be a big help for somebody else coming in to take care of your personal pets.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great. And I know last year I did some radio with iHeart, Ryan Gorman's in Tampa during our hurricane, and spent about 15 minutes talking with him. And I had gone on pinellascounty.gov and then hillsborough.gov. And like you said, the federal FEMA even has some stuff. Mm-hmm. These all have a downloadable brochure and a list of information to help you plan, because you also will want your papers with your vaccinations and your rabies, especially if they're not wearing the tag. Even if they are, I always say get them ready, put them in a page protector, and like clip them to your cage, right? So that, because you don't want to be running around finding this stuff, because again, if you're evacuating, there are people involved too. Not dismissing how we love our pets, but if I've got a few kids and I've got to sort out what I need, to make sure, maybe one of the child or somebody in your family has medication or something, need to really be thinking through all that. And to Tommy's point, because of the nature of the business we're in, being in the entertainment world, and then by virtue of that, sometimes being mobile, we're very good at, I always anticipate the worst and hope for the best. I call it Murphy's Law. If I'm prepared, it's likely not going to need to be used. It's when I get caught with my pants down. So I'm kind of anal about this. I actually have, in my career, many times helped other people plan emergency planning, whether it's escaped animals or what we need to do to keep animals safe and that. So the one thing that didn't come up a lot when I was doing this last year, we've talked a little about this, when you're running your dog. So your dog to go potty may have to go for a 35-minute to hour walk down the block, turn left, go right, and on that person's lawn, it will poop every day. So I always say you need to train out of that, because even if you just might not feel like it one day, or you hurt your ankle and you can't take a mile walk. But what about the driving rainstorm or the hurricane, or, if you can't go that way, there's a fire or something. So Tommy said this when we were planning our podcast, put a cue on the poo. So with that in mind, one, we're laughing about it, but seriously, you should make sure your dog is able to go potty when you're holding your leash. And wherever that is, it might have to be on concrete, it might be against the mulch or whatever. But then one of the things that I found online that I thought was cool is to take a kiddie pool or form any kind of a little barrier in your garage or your back porch or wherever, and put either mulch or sand in it, so that you have a dog litter, potty area, for lack of a better word. You could use sod, whatever you want to do. But if you're up north in a major blizzard too, what a great way to not have to let your pet outside. The smaller the pet, the bigger, like Trooper wouldn't even make it in a snowstorm. He's solid white. You wouldn't find him, but he would just disappear. So I thought that was a really interesting one. I didn't grow up thinking about that, but we always had horse stalls, so we always had that kind of ready-made option. So I thought that was really neat. And the other thing is, you're going to have to use a kennel more than likely. And whether you're going to a shelter for a hurricane, I know you have to use a kennel. You have to put them in the room with the other animals, and you don't get to hang out with them. It's very, like I said, it's not a wishy-washy thing at all. It's very defined, and only certain shelters do it. So one, do you want your dog to be terrified and shaking and then incessantly barking? Even you will be annoyed after about 12 hours of your dog barking. And by the way, I've said this on the podcast before, they don't run out of fuel. They can bark nonstop for days. It's unbelievable. You think they'd get a sore throat or something, but just be around a lot of dogs in kennels and you will experience that. So make sure they're very comfortable in there and that other people could take them in and out of their cages. This is all part of the foundation work that I do. And I do this because I want them to be safe and cared for in whatever we come up against. So the kennel is really important. And also why your personalized training program may not serve you well. The more universal you make your training program, and I always go back to the AKC Canine Good Citizen program for foundation training. I can hand the leash to Tommy and say, here, take my dog, and the dog looks up at you and walks off with you, or doesn't freak out if I have to reach in the cage and get him out, and it's not, I'm not his mommy, So the personalized training programs, well, if you do this and he has to do this to put the leash on, and he has to do that to go outside, and he has to do this to go potty, those are all gonna haunt you and in your biggest moments, right?
Yeah, we had this happen a lot at the vet clinic.
Sure.
The vet clinic that I worked for also had a boarding facility with it. So we saw both medical cases and then just boarding cases. And the dogs that were not well socialized or not handled by multiple people or had very specific ways of doing things really were the more stressed ones overall. And then oftentimes dogs that came in, the bulk of our surgeries were spay and neuters. That's a pretty common, typical thing. But some of the dogs would come in and they didn't know how to walk on a leash, and they didn't know how to go to the bathroom while you had them on the leash.
Yeah.
So we're out there, trying to walk this poor, just spayed female puppy, and she doesn't know, she's not sure that she can go potty while you're standing there.
Yeah.
So getting them used to that is a really big thing early on, putting a cue on the poo, as we say. And then another thing I saw on that same idea, using the kiddie pool, getting them used to the idea of going in something like that, maybe putting it in your garage or a spare
I love
room
that, huh?
Yeah, I saw a clip the other day. It was a service dog that was taken on a cruise ship. So I think the woman was blind, and so she had a seeing eye dog.
Okay.
And well, what do you do with a dog on a cruise ship? Well, they had a very specific area up in the crew area away from the public, and it was a little grass pool that they had made for this dog. And I guess that's becoming more and more common on some of these cruise ships. But the dog had to learn how to go in this little area.
Yeah.
That's a lot to deal with, being on a big boat that's moving, and then having to go in just this very tiny little area. But she had a really well-handled, well-trained dog, had a cue for the dog to know it was time to go to the bathroom. And so it was not a problem.
Very neat.
That's something to think about. Is that's something she needs for her entire life. It's part of her entire program.
Yeah, service dogs, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, but take a little piece of that for your at-home dog, just your pet, and use that for the worst case scenario. When there's a blizzard, when there's a hurricane and you're stuck inside, whatever it is, have these options available to you, and you don't wait until the hurricane is happening. You set it up well in advance, and a couple times a week they use it and get used to, having that as part of their normal routine.
Yeah. And Tommy, that was, I believe, your training tip, talking about preparing at the vet, that don't wait. And we kind of preach that on here with fireworks, that type of thing. You have to role play and practice all these things because you're changing a behavior, right? So a dog that doesn't know it's supposed to go potty or allowed to go potty is, now you're teaching it something new. But all of this stuff you need to really be thinking about in advance. I have this dog, Otis, and again, you could follow along with his training on our YouTube channel. He does not know how to go potty if he's not loose in the yard. And he's 3 years old. I'm working on this, trust me, but
yeah, you've just had him a short time.
Yeah. So here's how I'm going to do it. And I frankly haven't done this, and this is how I need to do it. So he goes potty every morning. He has to pee and poo every morning. And he sleeps good. He doesn't go in the house. I now let him sleep on a rug near my bed because, again, he's never had interaction with people. So I'm trying to keep that going. He's done a lot on the bed, but he's nearby. He sleeps good through the night. He stays there. It's all good. So what I need to do is get a leash and collar on him in the morning and go out with him when I know he has to go, right? Because during the day, my odds of catching him at exactly the right moment, I have an idea when he goes, but he's definitely going to go in the morning. So I need to go out, probably a longer leash and then shorter and shorter, and praise him, tell him it's okay. I'm not going to give him cookies. He doesn't eat them anyhow. He has no interest in food, not a food-motivated dog. And so that's how I'm going to start with it. So that's a suggestion to folks as we're getting ready for the emergency, your emergency plan. That's a way to start with the put a cue on the poo, is when in the morning when you know they have to go.
Yeah,
and
it's something I've done with Jimmy Dean again, and it just popped up because of the skunk situation. So now after dark, I'm a little afraid the skunk might still be in the yard.
Yeah.
So I've made a point now for the last few days of after dark, if he needs to go out, I put him on a leash. And I have not been doing that for a while. I'd kind of let it go for a while. I just kind of open the back door and he goes. But now that I've had to make it a little bit more of a precise thing, he actually is much better behaved, getting to the door, sitting down, waiting for me to put the leash on, walking out. The first day we walked out and he lunged onto the end of the leash and, hit the end and went, ah! And now he walks out very politely. And it was just because I kind of let things go.
Right.
So I need to take my own advice
maintain our training programs. Yeah.
But we let things go. We're humans. We're not infallible. But yeah, it has made a big difference actually in his general behavior, being much calmer and much more in his behavior, being more communicative of what he needs.
Right.
So it's been actually a really good thing. So it's just something you need to throw into your practice on a regular basis when you can and you have the time.
Yeah.
And get them used to these things that you're gonna need in an emergency.
Yeah. So even if you don't kennel regularly, like you don't keep a dog in a kennel overnight, every so often, a couple times a week, just get in a habit when you're home is a great time, because if they haven't been in the kennel for a while, don't put them in the kennel and leave right away. So, work up to that. Be in the same room with them. Then put the kennel in a room close by where they could hear the TV or hear you on the phone. Then go out for 10 minutes, come back. So work up to it, but keep doing those things. And that was a good lesson for me. I think I was telling you, I went and announced a circus as the ringmaster. Otis went to the circus this past week. And it was wonderful because I was able to bring him with me. I have a dog run that I put under a tent right beside our big top. But I stayed at a house and I kenneled him. And I hadn't done a lot of kenneling with him, but it was really good for me to follow my own advice again, which I was getting ready to do, but it forced it because we went on a road trip and they didn't have a fenced yard. So he was on a long cable, and it was really challenging to get him to go potty. So it made me think, now I really have to get on it and help him. And he's not a normal dog. He doesn't have emotion. He's not a playful, just doesn't know anything. So I'm also challenged by that, right? Like you can't say good boy to him and he's like, cool, she liked what I did. He's always over processing. Yeah. So it's really a big deal. Okay, so that
brings up another topic that we'll get to eventually, but traveling with pets.
Yeah, we need to do a thing on that because we're both really good at that, and that's a great topic that we can spend some time on. There's some things that are obvious and things that are not so obvious, right?
Absolutely.
So one of the other things that I wrote down here that wasn't in the brochures that I had seen or the flyers was to take pictures of your pet, and especially like particular markings that we do that with horses often for their yearly Coggins test and such. But make sure, because if they get separated from you and you're trying to get them back, also microchip, of course. I think that's fairly standard now. Not real expensive, but to get your microchip and get some pictures of them. And then Tommy, I read like identifiers. So I know what we do on horses. We resort to everything from a ribbon in their mane to putting numbers on their hooves with chalk, which could come off if it's really wet, even on their bodies.
Yeah.
I even know people who have clipped numbers into their, which doesn't hurt the horse at all. It's just taking the long hair. But like dogs, sometimes having a collar on could be dangerous because they could get hung, attached to something. It's
problem.
A catch-22.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is it going to be better for you to have a tag that's not going to come off? Or is it going to be a problem that the collar gets hung up on something?
Yeah.
And that's a judgment call. There's no right answer on that.
I tend to say you're going to leave your collar on your dog. But if you've got a lot of the things hanging off, they could easily get pulled off or such. So I think you'd want to have something written on the collar or inside the collar, correct?
Yeah, they make now collars that are embroidered. that you can embroider your phone
I've
number
seen
and
those.
information on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's probably a good option. If you know an emergency is coming, you can put that kind of a collar on them.
Or
And
buy
then
the plastic that it's like a biothane, and you could write on it with a Sharpie would work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can get collars that are breakaway, that have a little clip on them that's going to break away with a certain amount of pressure.
Yeah, that would be good.
That's not a bad idea. It's really just a judgment call. There's no right or wrong answer with that.
And this is an extreme circumstance. This is kind of what we saw in the Ukraine, stories out of the Ukraine, where people literally let their animals loose because they couldn't care for their people, let alone their animals. So maybe in a bad fire or a horrific storm with horses, it's a common practice. If you can't keep them in the barn and you're worried about their well-being, you're better off to let them figure it out and turn. Yeah. That's how I grew up. Turn them loose, our exotics or our horses,
especially in the hurricane areas.
Yeah.
Where you're not sure that the building is going to remain standing or stay
and then get
dry.
Flooded, and you
might get underwater. I've
seen some horrible pictures of horses in stalls. So let them loose. And, where we are in this country and the alerts and such we get, not as common of a practice. But, I always think worst case and want to be prepared. So if for some reason, or your dog got loose because they were terrified and you weren't holding on to them well because you're distracted with your baby or your whatever, make sure they have identifiers on them, including the microchip.
The microchip is probably the best solution.
Yeah.
And on that note, make sure that you register the microchip.
I'm just doing that now. I really didn't know as much about how that worked, so that's very interesting.
That makes it quicker to get your information. Even if you don't register it, what happens? So if a pet came into the vet clinic and we scanned for the microchip, we could take that number and call the manufacturer. And then the manufacturer would tell us who they sold that microchip to.
Oh, interesting.
So it would be some other vet clinic. And so then we could call that vet clinic. That vet clinic has a record of what number they, what pet they put that particular microchip in. So it can be traced, but it's much faster
if you register.
if you get it registered. So
on that note, how does somebody know? I had got an email because I went through a rescue to get my dog. So they sent me the microchip registration. Actually, I also got a lot of fluff stuff with it, which was a bit confusing, very frustrating with this spam crap or sales. Like I went down the road of filling everything out only to realize it was a third party who wanted to charge me for managing my microchip, right? Yeah. But how would they ask their vet, I guess, for just the actual name of the microchip, and then you go on that website and fill it out?
Yeah,
what's the best way to do that?
When your pet is actually microchipped at the vet clinic, you're going to get a little card usually that has the information on how to register the microchip. And it will come with a little sticker of the number that goes with that particular chip. What if
that is not your scenario though? You didn't put the chip in.
Yeah, if you did not put the chip in, then it kind of depends on the situation. But if the chip is registered, then the person that chip is registered with will have to release their ownership rights with the company. And then you can register it in your name or do like a transfer.
So probably the easiest thing would, the next time you're at your vet, inquire about it. Can they read it right there and then tell you what company it is and such?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm just going through that, so it's high on my mind right now. So
so it'll be dependent on who registered originally the chip as to how the company handles if you can transfer it or if you have to get permission from the previous owner or something like that. There'll probably be a little bit of paperwork involved.
Okay. But at the end of the day, it's a great identifier for emergency preparedness. And again, whatever county you live in or state, first you could go right on those. And we're going to post the ready.gov and the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. They also have animal evacuation and crisis information. And they even have a certification, which is interesting, to be a person who helps with animal evacuations, which I
interesting.
might look into a bit more. I have some friends on the zoo side who started an official program. They've always helped each other, but rescuing the exotics, because talk about a big deal.
That's a process.
Moving elephants or rhinos or, cats, whatever it is. It's a huge process. Yeah. And sanctuaries need to be very mindful of this, because now we're moving multiple animals, right?
Yes.
And sometimes they're not in a position to be able to move them. So, they have to do the best they can.
Just like what we're saying for the pets, have they practiced the behaviors that go into the process?
You haven't loaded a horse regularly. The chance that they're going to load when you're nervous and there's something going on is slim to none. And
I say that so often with my horse clients is, when was the last time you loaded?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Pull
out the trailer today.
At least weekly. It sounds silly, but park your trailer somewhere. And Clinton Anderson, who's actually going to be my next Animal Tales podcast. I just wrapped up an interview with him. Very lively and fantastic. But at his place, he bought, and this is doable for some people, he bought a little 2-horse trailer and set it on the obstacle course, took the wheels off. And so that the horses would be loading regularly. Sure. Anything like that, I can't recommend it enough, to make sure, because again, Tommy and my wheelhouse are horses and dogs. So just, again, practice, like everything in life. This isn't just going to organically happen for you when you need it most and you're in your biggest crisis. And it will benefit you when you're traveling and you need your neighbors to watch your animals, or if you have your own minor emergency and you can't be home that night and they have to take your animals or whatever that is. So lots of good information to start thinking about ahead of time, for sure. Anything you want to add on this point before we move on, Tommy?
I think that about wraps it up. Just be sure to, if you do have pets, look up these websites and kind of go through and make your personal plan for this. And keep in mind that you're planning for the worst.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but if you have a plan in place and you're prepared, you're going to be a lot more peace of mind and a lot easier to deal with all of these things.
Absolutely. And your pet's going to benefit because you're putting in place some good training procedures that you have to stay up to date on. And that's going to benefit you. And we'll put all these links in show notes as well.
Yeah.
All right, Tommy, so we're up to one of our favorite segments, and you get to take that this week. It's Pet Peeves. I'm waiting with bated breath to see what you come up with.
So I chose a little more of a generalized topic today for my pet peeve, but my pet peeve is assuming. So we know the adage that to assume is to make an ass out of you and me. And I see it happening so often with animals, with people, with just across the board. People assume that you think the same way, that you have the same values, that you have the same protocols, that you are allowed to do whatever you want. We sort of assume that we have all of these freedoms and liberties and choices and things, and you don't always. So one of the big ones that came up is I have a client that's going to have her family over for Easter this coming weekend. And she has a whole gaggle of grandchildren. And she wants them to be able to come and ride. She has an older horse that's perfect for pony rides. But that's not what she does every day. So the horse isn't used to it, and the people are not used to it. They're not horse people, her grandkids. So I gave her some protocols, some ideas on how to do it safely, because the kids come up and they assume that they can just run up to the horse and pet them. And we do it with dogs. I walk my dog out in the park, and people assume they could come up either with their own dog and let them get nose to nose, or they want to come up and pet the dog. And don't assume that you can just come up and pet any dog or pet any horse. And I think it's the Disneyfication of the animals. We assume that everything is sunshine and lollipops, and that we have the Cinderella song playing in the background, and all of the animals just show up, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
And in reality, on their best day, they're dangerous. So don't assume that you can just show up and pet anything, and don't be offended when you're told that you can't.
Right, we got to get those yellow ribbons out.
Yes,
from
exactly.
Our last. If you don't know what that is, listen to the last podcast. Well, great. I couldn't agree more. It's a pet peeve of mine when people come up and just assume. It happened to me in the park yesterday. I was walking because it's hot here now. It's already warm, Florida. So we went to the park where it's shadier because I worry about the pads of their feet on the hot asphalt or sidewalks. Yep. So I went with my girlfriend to the park, took a nice long walk, and 2 different people were let their dogs out on the long leash to visit, and just made the assumption. And I was like, my dog's in training. No. And both were cute little dogs, but people do that with dogs that aren't cute and little. Not that any dog won't bite, but the impact of the bigger dog is so. Well, stop assuming.
Or assume that they're dangerous.
Yeah.
Assume the animal is dangerous.
Make that assumption.
Assume the animal is not vaccinated.
I come to it from that. Yeah.
Yeah. Assume the animal has a parasite infestation.
Yeah.
Assume the opposite end. Don't just assume everything is sunshine and lollipops.
Right. Cue the unicorns and rainbows.
There you go.
All right. Excellent. My training tip this week is I'm just kind of refreshing myself about our past training tips. And I guess I'm going back to the basics, which is you cannot skip the foundation. You cannot. And you should be starting this from the time the puppies are born in my book, but a lot of us don't get a puppy till they're 8 weeks old. But it could start right there with a little bit of a leash and collar and keeping them close by. But foundation training is it should be a requirement because it's the one thing we can do to ensure the well-being of that animal for their life. And Clinton and I were just talking about horses, and he said his foals at 8 weeks old are already halter broke, and they do the opposite. Instead of leading the mama and having the baby run around, and you and I both know by 8 weeks they're kicking and farting and bucking and being little stinkers. They get right up to you, and then you can't grab them. He leads the foal, and the mama follows, which is really interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but with puppies, start right away. Make it just part of their world. They don't know anything different other than learning manners and behavior. And AKC, Canine Good Citizen, which I've preached, is a great foundation training program. But not everybody can train their own dog. So if you can't, it's the best investment you'll ever make to have somebody help you with your foundation training or train and board your dog, which I do, and then give them back to you trained. You still have to keep up with it. You still have to make sure instill all those values, but at least the basics are done for you. So don't skip over that. And if you're calling me to say you have a problem with your dog walking on a leash or your dog jumping or counter surfing, I know for sure it's just a hole in your foundation training. So it's just a symptom of a bigger problem. So don't skip that.
All the time with any species.
Yeah.
I have a client now that the horse was having a problem with the farrier picking the feet up. And I said the problem is not the feet.
Not the feet. It's the
Come
behavior.
to find out the horse was not well handled and did not have good ground manners, and that's what we started with.
Yeah.
And within just a few sessions, you could pick the feet up, no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, we see it.
Don't skip the foundation.
Don't skip the foundation. It's critical. And again, I if I haven't said it I can't say it enough, the best and most loving thing you can do with all the emotion surrounding our animals and all of that. You truly want to be emotional, do something right by your animals. Train them well. Those are not the animals that come into harm's way typically. And that is the one thing you can do to ensure their well-being, no matter who they live with, what their life brings to them. So I can't impart that enough. And I want to say again, put a Q on the poo. We're gonna put that in show notes, what we mean exactly by that, but it's part of your emergency preparedness. By the way,
Absolutely.
some of the upcoming topics Tommy and I have been batting around, we're going to talk about planning for vacations with your animals. It's coming up over the summer. The do's and don'ts of particularly dogs, taking your dogs with you. And the vet, going to the vet. We're talking about having a vet on to help us discuss all the things you need to know about before you go to the vet and when you're at the vet. So I'm excited about that because that's something I hear a lot about, how fearful it is. And again, if you're saying that, I can tell you your dog is going to be fearful because it's a narrative in your head. So I hope
we fear the things we don't understand. So maybe if we talk about it, you'll be understanding of it and not be so fearful.
Exactly. I'm really excited about that. So I hope this is a good resource for you. Please share it, subscribe, rate and review it. It's a podcast as well as on our YouTube channel and Facebook. And we, as always, appreciate your joining us for some doggone good information. Thank you, Tommy.
Thanks, Heidi.